Welcome back to The Exchange. Today, we're diving deep into the history of a figure we all think we know, Father Christmas.
Yeah.
We're specifically focusing on how he evolved in England.
Right.
And trust me, his story is a lot more complex and fascinating than you might expect.
Absolutely. We'll be looking at historical records,
Oh, wow.
literary references, and some fascinating folklore to uncover how Father Christmas transformed from his early roots to the iconic image we know today.
Most of us have this image of Father Christmas as the jolly guy in the red suit.
Yeah.
But his backstory is filled with surprising twists and turns.
It is.
It's a story that reflects changing cultural attitudes,
Yeah.
political clashes, and even the influence of transatlantic exchange.
What's intriguing is that the idea of Christmas itself being personified predates the modern Santa Claus.
Oh, really?
In 15th century England, you find figures like Sir Christmas or the King of Christmas, who embodied the spirit of the holiday.
So instead of a figure like Father Christmas, Christmas itself was the main character, leading the festivities.
That's right.
I'm curious to know more about these early personifications.
Sure.
What role did they play in the celebrations?
These personifications were all about embodying the joy and merriment of Christmas.
Okay.
They were often featured in festive songs and plays, acting as masters of ceremonies for the feasting, singing, and drinking that marked the holiday.
It sounds like a very different Christmas from the one we often see depicted today.
It was.
You mentioned drinking, and that brings to mind the Puritan movement
Yes.
and their attempts to reform Christmas celebrations.
Uh-huh.
Didn't they see all this merriment as a problem?
Absolutely. The Puritans, with their strict religious beliefs,
Right.
viewed many traditional Christmas customs as excessive
Okay.
and rooted in paganism. They saw the feasting, drinking, and revelry
Oh, wow.
as distractions from the true religious meaning of the holiday.
Yeah.
They even went so far as to pass an ordinance in 1647,
Oh, my goodness.
attempting to abolish Christmas altogether.
Wow. Trying to cancel Christmas.
Yeah,
That must have created quite a backlash.
they're good.
What was the public reaction to this Puritan attempt to outlaw the holiday?
The Puritan ban on Christmas was met with resistance from many segments of society.
Right.
People were deeply attached to their traditional celebrations, and the attempt to suppress them sparked a cultural clash.
So, in a way, the Puritans inadvertently helped create the Father Christmas figure as we know him today.
Yes.
By trying to abolish Christmas, they actually fueled a movement to preserve its traditions.
Right.
And Father Christmas became a symbol of that resistance.
That's precisely what happened. Royalist supporters who opposed the Puritans saw Father Christmas as a symbol of the good old days of Christmas cheer that they wanted to preserve. They used his image in pamphlets and writings to rally support for the traditional celebrations.
They used Father Christmas as a mascot to fight for the right to party.
Haha.
That's a kind of activism I can get behind. Do we have any specific examples of how Father Christmas was portrayed in these pro-Christmas propaganda efforts?
Yes. There's a fascinating example from 1658.
Okay.
A satirical pamphlet titled The Examination and Trial of Old Father Christmas. In this pamphlet, Father Christmas is put on trial by the Commonwealth.
A trial for Father Christmas.
Yes,
That sounds like it would have been quite the spectacle.
it does.
I wonder if they had a jury of his peers, maybe some elves and reindeer.
Uh-huh.
What were the arguments used against Father Christmas in this trial?
The pamphlet uses humor and satire to critique the Puritan regime and its attempt to suppress traditional customs.
Okay.
It mocks the accusations against Father Christmas, highlighting the absurdity of trying to outlaw a figure who represents joy and generosity.
It sounds like they were using Father Christmas to poke fun at the Puritans and their strict rules.
Exactly.
It's amazing how even in the 17th century, this figure was already intertwined with political and social commentary.
Yes, very much so.
So the Puritans tried to cancel Christmas.
It did.
And Father Christmas became a symbol of resistance.
Right.
But what happened to him after the monarchy was restored and Christmas celebrations were allowed again?
After the Restoration in 1660, Christmas celebrations were back in full swing, and Father Christmas continued to be a prominent figure in the festivities.
Okay.
His image evolved through various forms of popular entertainment, particularly folk plays and what were known as mummers' plays.
I've heard of mummers' plays,
Right.
but I'm not entirely sure what they were like. Can you give us a sense of what these performances were like and how Father Christmas was portrayed within them?
Mummers' plays were a form of traditional folk entertainment.
Okay.
Especially popular in rural England, they involved colorful costumes,
Oh, well.
lively music, and often humorous or satirical storylines. Father Christmas often appeared as a character in these plays,
Right.
embodying the spirit of the holiday and bringing good cheer to the audiences.
So these plays were like a mix of theater music and social commentary.
Yes.
With Father Christmas at the center of it all. Was he always portrayed as the jolly, benevolent figure we know today?
Not quite. In these early plays, his portrayal varied considerably.
Really?
Sometimes he was depicted as a hunchback,
Mm-hmm.
other times as a rather grotesque figure. He was still mainly associated with adult revelry and feasting,
Right.
not with children or gift-giving as he is today.
It's fascinating how his image went through these different phases.
Yes, it is.
So when did he start to become the Father Christmas who brings presents to children?
Okay.
What prompted that shift in his character?
That transformation really took shape during the Victorian era. The Victorians had a romanticized view of Christmas,
Okay.
emphasizing family togetherness and the importance of children. This sentiment greatly influenced how Father Christmas was portrayed.
The Victorians, with their love for sentimentality and tradition. It seems like so much of our modern Christmas imagery comes from that era. How did this Victorian sensibility reshape Father Christmas?
The Victorians were key in transforming Christmas from a holiday primarily focused on adult merrymaking
Right.
to a more family-centered celebration.
Right.
With children at the heart of it, Father Christmas became a symbol of this shift,
Yeah.
evolving into a more benevolent, gift-giving figure associated with the joy and innocence of childhood.
So the Victorians gave Father Christmas a makeover,
They did.
both in terms of his appearance and his role in the Christmas narrative.
Right.
It's like they created a whole new brand identity for him. What were the key elements of this Victorian transformation?
Think of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol,
Okay.
published in 1843. While the ghost of Christmas Present isn't explicitly called Father Christmas, he embodies many of his characteristics: generosity, good cheer, a connection to food and drink,
Wow.
and an association with the spirit of Christmas.
Dickens definitely played a role in shaping our cultural understanding of Christmas. Are there other examples of how Victorian literature or art influenced Father Christmas's image?
The rise of illustrated magazines in the 1840s was also crucial.
Okay.
They helped solidify a more consistent visual image for Father Christmas.
Right.
A jolly bearded man, often clad in festive attire and surrounded by symbols of abundance and merriment.
So the Victorians gave us the image of Father Christmas as a kindly gift-giving figure.
Yes.
But there's another important piece of the puzzle here, right?
There is.
The arrival of a certain someone from across the Atlantic.
That's right. We can't talk about the evolution of Father Christmas without acknowledging the influence of Santa Claus, who brought his own distinct set of traditions and imagery from America.
This is where things get really interesting.
Right.
We had these two figures, Father Christmas with his English roots
Yeah.
and Santa Claus with his American origins, starting to interact and influence each other. What were the key differences between these two figures at the start?
Initially, there are some notable distinctions. Father Christmas was more closely tied to English folklore and traditions, often associated with feasting, drinking, and the spirit of good cheer. Santa Claus, on the other hand, had evolved from a blend of Dutch-German and American influences, and he was more closely associated with gift-giving and the magical aspects of Christmas Eve.
It's almost like they represented different aspects of the holiday.
Yeah.
Father Christmas, the embodiment of festive cheer, and Santa Claus, the bringer of gifts. How did the English public react to the arrival of this American Santa Claus?
In the mid-19th century, as transatlantic travel increased, awareness of American Christmas customs, including Santa Claus, began to spread in England. English publications started featuring articles about the American Santa Claus tradition, introducing the English public to this new figure and his unique customs.
So there was a period of coexistence with both figures circulating within the cultural landscape. Do we have any specific examples of how this played out?
There's a fascinating example from the Olympia exhibition in London in 1888.
Okay.
The exhibition featured a procession that included both Father Christmas and Santa Claus, almost as if they were separate celebrities appearing at the same event.
That must have been an interesting sight.
It was.
Two figures representing different cultural interpretations of the same holiday. Do they acknowledge each other? Do they have a conversation? Maybe a gift exchange?
We don't have specific accounts of their interaction at the event, but their inclusion in the same procession highlights the public's awareness of these two distinct figures. It also suggests a growing fascination with the American Santa Claus and his associated traditions.
So at this point, they were still distinct figures in the public imagination.
Right.
But eventually they started to merge, right?
Yeah.
How did that blending of Father Christmas and Santa Claus happen?
The merging of these figures was a gradual process, driven by a variety of factors, including increased transatlantic cultural exchange, the influence of printed media, and the commercialization of Christmas.
It sounds like a cultural fusion.
It was.
With elements of both figures blending together to create a hybrid image.
Right.
What specific attributes of Santa Claus did Father Christmas adopt during this process?
Over time, Father Christmas began to take on more of Santa Claus's attributes.
Okay.
His costume became more standardized, often depicted as a red hooded gown trimmed with white fur, very much in line with the American Santa Claus. While he sometimes still carried holly, the traditional holly crown was often replaced with a hood, further aligning his appearance with his American counterpart.
So Father Christmas got a bit of a style update.
He did.
Incorporating elements of Santa's iconic look.
Right.
But what about the more functional aspects of Santa's tradition? Like coming down the chimney and leaving presents in stockings.
Right.
How did those elements translate into the English context?
The adoption of those specific elements took a bit longer.
Okay.
It was met with some interesting cultural adjustments. While the idea of unseen gift givers leaving presents for children on Christmas Eve was readily embraced, the method of delivery sparked some debate.
A debate about how Santa delivers the presents.
Yes.
What were the alternative options being considered? Was there a suggestion box for Santa?
Haha. In England, there was an older tradition of fairies leaving gifts in shoes placed by the fireplace.
Oh, wow.
So when the American Santa Claus tradition arrived with its emphasis on stockings, there was some confusion about which receptacle was the correct one.
Interesting.
You even find illustrations from that time showing children with both stockings and shoes filled with presents, suggesting a blending of the two traditions.
So it was a stocking versus shoe showdown. That's an interesting cultural clash with different traditions vying for dominance. What was the outcome of this receptacle rivalry?
The stocking tradition eventually won out, becoming the dominant one in England. But it's fascinating to see how traces of older pre-Santa Claus beliefs lingered for a while, reflecting the gradual nature of cultural change.
It's like a cultural palimpsest with layers of different traditions overlapping and interacting. Are there any other examples of this blending of traditions?
Yes.
Where older English customs mixed with the newer Santa Claus influences?
Even as late as 1901, there's an illustration with the caption, "Did you see Santa Claus, Mother?" The image shows both a stocking and a shoe overflowing with gifts.
Wow.
This suggests that the idea of Santa Claus coming down the chimney wasn't fully integrated into the English Christmas narrative at that point. It highlights the continued presence of older beliefs about magical gift givers.
So even as Santa Claus was gaining popularity, there was still a sense of ambiguity about how he delivered the goods. This fusion of figures and traditions is truly fascinating.
It is.
But when did this image of Father Christmas, with all the Santa Claus features fully integrated, become the standard one we know today? When did he achieve his final form?
That final form really solidified in the early 20th century. By then, most people didn't really distinguish between Father Christmas and Santa Claus anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The Oxford English Dictionary from that period even defines Father Christmas as a personification of Christmas, now conventionally pictured as a benevolent old man with a long white beard and red clothes trimmed with white fur who brings presents for children on the night before Christmas Day.
Oh, wow. So they're one and the same now.
It seems that the transatlantic blend was complete.
It really does. And it's interesting how they mentioned the red clothes specifically.
Yeah.
Wasn't there still some debate about what color Father Christmas should wear, even in the early 20th century?
Yes, you still find depictions of him in brown, green, blue, or even white.
Interesting.
But the major turning point was the Coca-Cola advertising campaign that launched in 1931.
Yes.
Their illustrations featured a very distinct Santa Claus in a bright red suit, and that image became hugely influential, pretty much cementing red as the definitive color for Father Christmas.
Coca-Cola. Always a master of branding. It seems they played a significant role in solidifying the modern image of Father Christmas. So by the mid-20th century, this transatlantic blend of Father Christmas and Santa Claus was complete.
Yes.
And the figure we know today had emerged.
Pretty much. Of course, there might still be some subtle differences in how the figure's perceived in England versus the United States.
Right.
But for the most part, the two traditions had merged into one iconic image.
It's amazing to think about the journey this figure has taken from ancient personifications of Christmas to the modern Father Christmas Santa Claus we know today.
It is.
What strikes me is how his story reflects broader cultural and social changes.
Absolutely. The evolution of Father Christmas is a fascinating reflection of shifting cultural values, religious beliefs, and even commercial influences. He's a figure who has adapted and evolved alongside society's changing understanding of Christmas itself.
We've seen how he went from a symbol of merriment and feasting to a personification of generosity and gift-giving. And now he's a global icon with a very specific look and backstory. What does this tell us about how traditions evolve over time?
It shows that traditions are not static. They are constantly being reshaped and reinterpreted in response to new ideas, cultural influences, and social trends. The story of Father Christmas is a great example of how traditions adapt and evolve while still retaining their core essence.
So even though his appearance and some of his attributes have changed, the core message of generosity, kindness, and the magic of Christmas remains at the heart of the Father Christmas tradition. It's a tradition that continues to resonate with people around the world.
Indeed. The enduring appeal of Father Christmas suggests that some aspects of the tradition tap into universal human desires for connection, celebration, and a sense of wonder, especially during the holiday season.
Well, listener, we've journeyed through centuries of history, explored folklore and literature, and even touched on the influence of advertising. I think it's safe to say that Father Christmas, with his surprisingly complex backstory, is a lot more than meets the eye.
He's a symbol of the holiday, a reflection of our cultural values, and for many a source of joy and wonder.
We hope this deep dive on the exchange has given you a new perspective on this iconic figure. Now we'd love to hear from you. What aspects of the Father Christmas tradition did you find most intriguing or surprising? What does this say about how we celebrate and understand Christmas today? Share your thoughts and continue the discussion in the video comments below.